Imagine a heart that weighs over 1,100 pounds, about the size of a small car, beating just once every 10 seconds, with a heartbeat that can be heard from over 2 miles away. That heart belongs to the largest animal to ever live on Earth. Not a dinosaur like you might think, but a blue whale. But what's truly astonishing isn't just their size, it's everything else about them. With modern science, we've discovered something strange. Their story looks a lot like ours. Whales once walked on land. They breathe air, form families, with some even mourning their dead, staying close for days. Without whales, entire ocean systems start to break down. But why? What makes them so important? What can they reveal about how ocean life adapts, connects, and survives? What can whales teach us about our own evolution on the planet Earth? And in exploring their story, could they be the key to understanding how our oceans survive and what our future depends on? To understand the profound impact of these marine giants, we must first understand them in their full complexity. If you ever have the chance to see a whale skeleton, look for a bone structure that isn't attached to the rest of its body. This structure is located beyond its ribs, nestled under the spine. This small collection of bones is easily overlooked, but it represents a profound insight into the whale's evolutionary history. It's the remnant of a pelvis and a hind leg, anatomical evidence that these majestic marine giants once walked the land of the ancient Earth. Whales share their ancestry with large, hoofed mammals such as pigs, cows, and deer. Besides their residual pelvis, another clue to their terrestrial origins is the way they move. Whales swim by moving their tail up and down, unlike fish, which move their tails from side to side. Think about your own spine. You can flex your back up and down, but you can't do the same from left to right. Whales don't swim like fish because they have the spinal structure of a land mammal. So, if whales came from the land, what kind of land animal were they? To grasp the full trajectory of how these magnificent creatures made their way from land to sea, we must look back millions of years. Imagine the rocky coastline of the ancient Tethys Sea 50 million years ago. The waters appear still. Then, an almost imperceptible movement. The top of an animal's head cautiously peeks out from below the water. Its eyes are perched atop its head, allowing it to survey its surroundings while concealed underwater. Satisfied that no danger lurks, it emerges from the sea, shaking the water from its furred body. With its small, stocky frame and long tail, you might mistake it for a wolf or a large dog from a distance. But its snout is much too long and narrow to be either. As it trots along the shore, a small fish glistens between its small, pointed teeth. The only feature that reveals its semi-aquatic lifestyle are its webbed feet. The very beginnings of an evolutionary legacy that would see its descendants return to the seas. This is Pakicetus, or the walking whale, the earliest known ancestor of the whales that traverse the open oceans today. Chasing fish in coastal waters and striding along the shallow sea floor, Pakicetus lived quite differently from modern whales. Instead, it roamed the shallow seas 50 million years ago, much more like the closest living cousin of modern whales, the hippo. Like ballast, The dense, heavy bones of both creatures allowed them to sink to the seafloor or riverbed where they could walk while submerged. The particular placement of their eyes at the very top of their heads meant that both could immerse themselves almost entirely while still being able to see above the water. Early whales, such as the raccoon-sized Indo-Hyas, exhibited similar behavior, using the water to elude predators, an instinct seen today in related hoofed mammals like mouse deer. Of course, shallow water didn't mean safety. The ocean had its own challenges, and some early whales were about to meet them head-on. The shallow seas inhabited by early whales were far from welcoming. Ancient crocodiles and sharks, often larger than their modern counterparts, prowled the shallows for prey. Whales adapting to an aquatic lifestyle reflect this. Basilosaurus, which lived about 40 million years ago, was over 8 times the size of Pakicetus at over 17 meters long. Among its adaptations for life underwater are its nostrils, positioned far back from the snout and near the top of its head, serving as a precursor to modern whales' blowholes. It was likely an apex predator, hunting fish, sharks, and even other smaller marine mammals. Just 10 million years after the first whales took to the water, whales had established themselves as a force in the ancient seas. After millions of years evolving in the ocean, early whales didn't just survive, they diversified. And what came next was unlike anything the seas had seen before. The descendants of those early whales now grace our oceans in a myriad of shapes and sizes. From the elusive, diminutive vaquita to the titanic humpback, their diversity is remarkable. The 88 known species of whales that exist today can be primarily classified by how they feed. The baleen whales, or mystaceti, gentle giants that sift through clouds of tiny plankton or krill, and the toothed whales, or odontoceti, spirited hunters and foragers that chase a variety of prey. As their name suggests, toothed whales capture prey with their teeth. Often active hunters, toothed whales, a group that includes sperm whales, killer whales, dolphins, and porpoises, pursue individual prey such as squid or fish. However, the number and type of teeth they possess are variable and are adapted to different functions. For example, Amazon river dolphins have over 100 teeth. Some are cone-shaped to grasp slippery prey like fish, but some are molar-like to crush the outer shells of crabs and snails. In contrast, the narwhal only has 2 teeth, one of which is its distinctive spiral tusk. Growing up to 10 feet long, the narwhal's tusk contains millions of nerve endings. Think about the feeling you get when you bite into ice cream. Some scientists think that the narwhal's tusk is a sensory organ that can detect temperature and pressure. But not all whales hunt with teeth. In fact, some of the largest whales alive today use a completely different strategy, one built around volume. Instead of teeth, baleen whales have hairy plates that hang from their upper jaws. These plates are baleen, which is what gives them their name. Baleen whales filter feed, swimming through large schools of tiny prey such as krill and small fish. As water flows through the baleen, it acts as a massive filtration system. While the outer structure resembles a fine-toothed comb, the inside is lined with thick bristles that filter and trap prey as water rushes out the sides of the whale's mouth. Though baleen whales feed on small prey, they include giants such as humpback or blue whales. These diverse feeding mechanisms highlight the adaptable nature of modern whales, setting the stage for understanding their evolutionary success in our oceans today. modern whales are such distinctive animals. Their closest living relative, the hippo, both looks and lives very differently from them. And yet, 50 million years of evolution have allowed them to assume all manner of shapes and sizes, venture into a varied range of habitats, and adopt a multitude of lifestyles and specialized adaptations. Whether they live in the murky rivers and tributaries of the Amazonian rainforest, like the smiling rosy-hued Boto, or the ice-dappled Antarctic seas like the sleek mottled minke whale, whales looked out at the myriad ecosystems of the open water and saw each one as an opportunity. Imagine the last time you went swimming. Taking the deepest breath you could, plunging into the waves with your eyes shut to avoid the sting of seawater, emerging from the water shivering and covered in goose pimples. As much as some of us enjoy swimming in the ocean, our bodies aren't necessarily adapted to surviving it. Most mammals, like us, are poorly adapted to life in the sea. Whales are an exception, having developed unique anatomy that allows them to thrive in the expanse of the open oceans. Whales in motion epitomize power, speed, and grace. The sleek bodies of the fastest whales slice through the water like a knife. Acrobatic bottlenose dolphins racing alongside boats, or the elegant arch of a sei whale cruising through the open ocean. Their fins and tail carefully control each sharp turn and sudden stop, maintaining balance of its body to coordinate complex maneuvers. Larger whales too benefit from the streamlined shape of the whale body, allowing giants like the humpback or blue whale to move with a mesmerizing balletic grace. With a powerful movement of their tail, they effortlessly glide underwater, carrying the bulk of their bodies with surprising fluidity. The ease with which whales move belies the energy needed to exist underwater. As warm-blooded mammals, we expend large amounts of energy to maintain our body temperature, a challenge magnified when submerged in the cold depths of the ocean. Whales surmount this challenge with blubber, a thick layer of fat under their skin. This insulating layer protects vital organs from the external cold and decreases the energy needed to keep the whale's internal temperature stable. It has the added benefit of being a protective layer for organs as well, a useful property when contending with the powerful jaws of predators such as sharks or orcas. With lungs instead of gills, whales must surface in order to breathe. While this might impose a constraint on their fully aquatic lifestyle, whales have made this necessity simpler by moving their nostrils to the top of their heads. Much like using a snorkel when swimming, this allows whales to keep their heads submerged when breathing, a useful tactic when watching for underwater prey. When the whale dives, the blowhole is sealed, preventing water from entering the lungs. Unlike humans, whales' trachea and esophagus are not connected, which means that opening their mouths to chase down a school of fish won't result in a lungful of water. But that isn't the only adaptation that whales possess to hunt underwater. A flash of white zips by. A squid darting away from a hungry dolphin. The dolphin, determined, gives chase, matching each twist and turn as predator and prey propel themselves into deeper water. As the chase leads them deeper still, the silhouette of the squid rapidly grows faint until it vanishes into the darkness. Sight is of little use at depths sunlight cannot penetrate. Rendered blind, some predators might give up the chase here, but the dolphin has a secret weapon it can deploy in the dark. With a burst of speed, it fires off a series of rapid-fire clicks in the direction it last saw the squid. The clicks whiz through the water. One of them strikes its target, the still fleeing squid. Ricocheting off the squid's body, the echo returns to the dolphin like a boomerang and resonates through its jawbone, traveling towards its inner ear. Buoyed by its success, the dolphin furiously fires off more clicks. Each click returns faster than the one before, signaling to the dolphin that it's closing in on its prey. The dolphin opens its jaws. Even without seeing it, the dolphin knows that the squid will be entrapped between them. When the dolphin emits clicks, they pass through one of the most important sensory organs involved in echolocation, a dense blob of fats. Unlike blubber, these fats aren't metabolized for energy but serve as sensory organs. The dense blob of fat is known as the melon and is located in the forehead. If you've seen videos of toothed whale heads appearing squishy, the melon is the reason for the head's bounciness. The melon isn't uniformly squishy, as the inner core is denser than the outer layers. This gradient of density transforms the melon into a sophisticated acoustic lens. Sound travels more slowly through inner layers than the outer ones. Like a magnifying glass can be used to focus and direct the rays of the sun, toothed whales use the melon to focus and direct sound. The blob of fat may look simple, but it allows toothed whales to hone in on specific objects with greater precision, zeroing in on its target like a missile. The most skilled melon movers are beluga whales, known as the canaries of the sea for their prolific vocalizations. You may have seen videos of the beluga's wonderfully expressive face. Much of that expressiveness is a varied range of melon movements. Belugas change the shape of the melon both to echolocate and to communicate. While that adorable forehead wiggle might be a friendly hello, it could be an example of a predator expertly honing in on its prey. Since antiquity, whale song melodies have captivated humanity. In Greek myth, the god of music and knowledge, Apollo, turns into a dolphin to guide a ship to the island of Delphi. It's no wonder that in whale song we hear something of the divine. Whales' complex vocalizations form sophisticated systems used to communicate and navigate, a testament to their intelligence and adaptability. Whales possess a virtuosic repertoire of vocalizations. Moans, groans, roars, squeals, whistles, trills, and sighs. These calls serve a myriad of functions, including attracting mates, coordinating group activities such as hunting and navigation, establishing territory, and warning of threats. They can even signify a range of relationships. What groups a whale is affiliated with, who their family is, what regions they've lived in, and even what prey they hunt. Dolphins even have signature calls to identify specific members of their group, functioning much like names. If you've ever lived overseas, hearing an accent from where you grew up might be a friendly reminder of home. In a similar vein, populations of whales usually develop specific vocal repertoires, known as dialects, based on the region they live in. Killer whales in particular use songs as complex signifiers of social relationships. Within a pod, families have a unique call they use for each other. Some calls are shared between pods, forming an extended clan. Pods that share calls sometimes socialize, while those that don't won't interact. killer whale calls also segregate according to what prey they hunt, primarily between those that eat fish and those that eat mammals, but further subdivide themselves into specific mammal types like seals, sea lions, and walruses. These calls are so identifiable that even grey seals could use them to discern which killer whales posed a threat to them and which did not. Definitely an ominous example of having a signature song. Just as human music taste changes, whale song can evolve as well. While some whales favour similar songs over long periods of time, others dramatically change theirs. Sperm whale songs are quite stable, while killer whales change theirs in a span of years. Perhaps the most prolific composer amongst whales is the bowhead whale. Each individual has their own song, and with the flourish of a jazz musician, they tend to improvise new songs or parts of songs. From the comfort of a familiar tune to the playful experimentation of music making, whales use song in ways that are strikingly relatable. Human culture can be shared instantly through the internet. A hit song in North America might take off in Asia too, unconstrained by geographical distance. But even though whales don't use the internet, their songs can travel the world too. Populations of male humpback whales learn their songs based on the breeding ground they visit. All the males in the same breeding ground sing the same song, with the song changing year from year. Researchers noticed that whales in French Polynesia were singing a song first heard from whales in Australia a few years ago, suggesting that the song had travelled over 6,000 miles. A few years later, whales off the coast of Ecuador were singing it too. It's thought that humpback whales pick up different songs as they migrate from their breeding ground to their feeding ground, crossing paths with different populations along the way. It seems that much like humans, whales can't resist a catchy tune. What are some of your most meaningful, treasured memories? Perhaps it's playing with a childhood friend, being patiently taught a new skill by your parents, or volunteering to help someone in need. The rich and diverse connections we foster with those around us are a significant part of our lives, a trait that we share with whales. The majestic creatures possess rich, complex social lives that, like us, involve play and cooperation, operating within social roles and hierarchies and learning from those that are more experienced. Like humans, they form lifelong relationships and tight-knit communities, sometimes spanning multiple generations. The structure, size, and nature of whale social groups can vary widely, ranging from stable groups of a few individuals to transient congregations of hundreds. Their social behaviors are likely governed by their ecological needs. If you wanted to play chess, you'd seek out one other person to play against. But if your hobby was soccer, you'd need to find 11 other people to form a team. Baleen whales are relatively solitary, congregating only in breeding or feeding grounds due to their extensive migrations. Toothed whales, which inhabit more diverse habitats and are less bound to strict migratory schedules, exhibit more defined social interactions and more elaborate social structures, as the context and motivations for them to operate in a group are far more varied. Smaller toothed whales, such as dolphins, tend to respond to the appearance of threats or prey by creating fission fusion societies. That is, temporary larger groups that might join together for hours or days before breaking into smaller subgroups. These groups are dynamic, with some groups changing more than 5 times per hour. But these loose associations are no less complex. Often formed to resolve a specific task, they rely on context-dependent knowledge and social signals for successful coordination. Roving groups of common dolphins may consist of thousands of individuals. Like an undersea battalion in formation, they fan out and cover vast areas of open water for schools of fish, collectively able to cover much more ground than if they were searching alone. Bottlenose dolphins gather into larger groups to master cooperative hunting. Within their tightly orchestrated assembly, some encircle a school of fish, herding them into a tight ball. Meanwhile, others nimbly dart into the school to feed. A few stand guard as watchful sentinels, scanning for potential threats as their podmates hunt and feast. By rotating roles, every dolphin enjoys a meal with ease and safety. Dolphins are even known to cooperate across species. Off the coast of New Zealand, false killer whales and bottlenose dolphins are rarely seen apart from each other, hunting together to increase their chances of a successful hunt. These partnerships are long-lasting and extend beyond hunting as well, with specific individuals spotted simply swimming side by side in sightings separated by as many as 5 years. This is Laguna in southern Brazil, a quiet coastal fishing community beneficiary of dolphins' gregarious, collaborative nature. In a striking instance of human-dolphin cooperation, artisanal fishers in Laguna collaborate with bottlenose dolphins to catch mullet. Fishers stand in the shallows with nets ready, waiting for dolphins to herd the mullet towards them. The fishers watch the dolphins, waiting for them to perform a deep dive as a cue to cast their nets. Researchers studying the practice discovered that dolphins also use these dives to signal the fishers. This careful synchrony yields mutual benefit. The fishers caught up to 4 times more fish in the presence of dolphins, while cooperative dolphins have an increased survival rate of 13% compared to non-cooperative dolphins. This cross-species alliance is deeply embedded in the cultural heritage of Laguna, with records of the practice dating back 150 years. In contrast to their smaller counterparts, larger toothed whales tend to form stable, smaller groups. Perhaps no other group takes group ties as seriously as killer whales. Led by a matriarch, the oldest female in the group, killer whale pods are based on familial ties for up to 4 generations, with offspring simply remaining with their mother even as adults. Their close bonds enable them to perform maneuvers that require close cooperation, coordination, and communication. Some of these strategies can be dangerous or risky, like tackling animals larger than they are or deliberately stranding themselves on shore. Without the guidance enabled by their lifelong relationships or the deep trust fostered between members of a pod, these hunting methods would be impossible to carry out. Killer whales deploy specialized tactics against their prey of choice. Those that hunt seals and walruses use their tails to create choppy waves that knock hapless seals off ice floes, while those hunting juvenile blue whales work together to drown them by holding them underwater. Some have even learned to take advantage of human presence, conducting raids on longline fisheries, picking off fish caught on commercial fishery longlines like hors d'oeuvre at a buffet. These sophisticated hunting strategies are carefully taught within the familial pod, as killer whales that feed on different prey are genetically distinct from one another, even if they inhabit the same waters. Of all the forms of love celebrated in our culture, the most unconditional is often said to be the love of a mother. As the close ties within kin-based killer whale pods suggest, whales also share this deep maternal bond. Across whale species, fathers don't participate in raising young, with mothers being entirely responsible for the growth and development of the calf. This is no easy feat, just ask any new parent. From the taxing nature of pregnancy to the difficulty of making sure the baby is fed, most new human parents would describe the early stages of caring for a baby as extremely tiring. Facing similar challenges, whales would probably agree. The shortest whale pregnancies are even longer than that of humans. Whales gestate their young for at least 10 months in the case of blue whales and minke whales, but the killer whale's pregnancy lasts twice as long as humans at 18 months. Once the calf is born, it needs to be fed, and fed a lot. Calves will nurse on their mother's milk for at least 6 to 8 months in baleen whales and up to 1 to 3 years in toothed whales. Whale milk is incredibly rich, containing 10 to 30% fat content for toothed whales and 30 to 50% fat for baleen whales. These gigantic babies require a corresponding amount of energetic investment. Blue whale calves consume up to 1 million kilocalories of milk every day. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of new parenthood occurs when human infant sleep schedules refuse to align to their parents, leading to many fitful nights for new parents. Fortunately for us, newborn human babies do eventually sleep, but the same cannot be said for their whale counterparts. Newborn killer whale and dolphin calves don't sleep for up to 3 weeks after birth, leaving their mothers to forego most sleep for that period as well. It might be little comfort to a sleep-deprived human parent, but at least they aren't taking care of a baby whale. Just as human children remain under the care of their parents, toothed whale calves will often remain with their mothers for an extended period of time, even after they've weaned. In extreme cases, parental care can extend far into adulthood. Male killer whales living on the Pacific coast of the United States are especially notorious for being spoiled by their mothers. Even when fully grown, male killer whales trail after their mothers, begging for salmon. This indulgence has a significant cost. Mothers with sons were half as likely to have another calf compared to mothers with daughters. While adult daughters hunt and catch prey on their own, as well as for their own young, their brothers monopolize their mother's attention so far that it decreases the chances that she'll reproduce again. Scientists think this favoritism might be due to the structure of killer whale pods. While females will give birth and raise their calves in their home pod, male killer whales will mate with females in other pods who will raise his offspring in her pod instead. So the best way to ensure the survival of his lineage is to make sure that he's as well taken care of as possible. Some mothers will always see their children as their precious babies, even if those babies are decades old and weigh over 13,000 pounds. The sheer size of whale calves, even if they aren't fully grown, likely explains why whales would agree with the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." Sperm whale pods treat child rearing as communal, with all members of the group watching over a calf, which can be 13 feet long and weigh over a ton. The importance of this responsibility is so significant that it's a recognized social role. While all members contribute, one individual is designated as the primary babysitter, committing to protect the calf when its mother is feeding. Other whales also display an intimate duty of care to new mothers and their young. Female dolphins in captivity often are present at births, even breaking the umbilical cord when the calf is born. This protective nature even extends to risking their lives for vulnerable mothers and their young. When threatened, groups of spotted dolphins school closely around a mother and her calf, ensuring their most vulnerable members are enclosed in a protective circle. Many of our stories center around love and connection, bonds between family and community that transcend our individual selves. Trust, empathy, compassion, these are all qualities that tie us to one another. Perhaps you have a relationship in your life that centers these qualities. What does it mean to you? How much do you value it? How does it feel knowing that somewhere out in the open oceans there are animals of a different species from you that roam corners of the world you will likely never see, that could feel much like you do? The social bonds that connect whales can differ, transient and lifelong, pragmatic and intimate, mediating both ruthless tactics and fierce protectiveness. Perhaps one of the reasons we feel so connected to whales is the fact that their social lives are so similar to our own. Like us, whales realize that no one is an island, even if you're large enough to be mistaken for one. Herman Melville's Moby Dick is an 1851 novel that tells the story of the captain of a whaling ship, Ahab, and his singular-minded quest to hunt down an elusive white whale. In the mid-1800s, Ahab wouldn't be the only whaler to be repeatedly foiled by their quarry. Whales were heavily hunted for their blubber to make whale oil, which was used to light street lamps, lubricate machinery, and even make soap. Records of sperm whale hunts from the beginning of the 1800s suggested that sperm whales were easy pickings. Their first response to danger was to huddle together for protection, making them sitting ducks for whalers' harpoons. By the 1820s, however, sperm whales had learned to either flee from or attack whaling boats head-on. In less than a decade, successful sperm whale hunts decreased by 58%. Researchers think that this behavior spread so quickly because it was learned. Perhaps the titular whale in Moby Dick learned to confound his pursuers from compatriots that had evaded the whale's sharp harpoons before. Just as whales quickly learned to avoid harm, they've also demonstrated a savvy eye for beneficial tactics, even modifying existing strategies when faced with new challenges. Humpback whale feeding is a spectacle to behold. Sometimes they cooperate to bubble net feed, a tactic used to corral fish into their waiting mouths. With a powerful breath, they unleash a cascade of bubbles from below that traps and disorients fish. Neatly enclosed in this effervescent net, the humpbacks are free to simply swallow schools of fish whole. In the 1980s, scientists observed a curious new addition to this strategy, first observed in a whale inhabiting the Gulf of Maine. Prior to trapping their prey in bubble nets, it raised its immense tail into the air and brought it down onto the water with a resounding slap. Within the next 30 years, hundreds of whales adopted this behavior, known as lobtail feeding. Researchers noticed that this coincided with a prey shift for the whales. Herring populations, once the primary food source for the whales, crashed, leaving whales to feed on bottom-dwelling sea lances. Buried in the sandy sea floor, sea lances weren't disturbed by whales' bubble nets unless whales disturbed the waters with a massive tail slap first. The biggest predictor for whether a whale knew how to lobtail feed is if they'd observed another individual do it before. For a humpback whale, that's just how it's always been done isn't a good enough reason to stop learning. If you've ever assembled furniture, fixed a toilet, or mended torn clothing, you've participated in one of the hallmarks of animal intelligence: tool use. Using tools has allowed us to exploit resources that other animals cannot and create solutions to problems that would otherwise still prove an obstacle to us. Which is why it's so significant to observe the same characteristic in other species. While whales were known for their ability to learn fast, they hadn't been observed using tools before. That is, until a curious observation made by scientists monitoring a bottlenose dolphin population in Australia's Shark Bay in 2014. More and more dolphins were seen carrying sponges on their snout when foraging on the sea floor for food. The soft, dense sponges were protective gear, shielding the dolphins' beaks from the painful edges of sharp rocks or wounds inflicted by stingray barbs. When the diets of sponge-carrying dolphins, or spongers, were analysed, they appeared to be different from non-spongers. This suggested that sponging enabled them to exploit a new niche by feeding on different prey than dolphins living in the same habitat. Likely bottom-dwelling fish cloaked from dolphin echolocation by surrounding sand and rocks. Sponging could be traced back to a single female dolphin who lived around 180 years ago, who the scientists named Sponging Eve. The daughters of Sponging Eve taught the behavior to their daughters as well as some of their sons. Today, up to 60% of female dolphins in Shark Bay are spongers, and up to half of sons born to sponging mothers adopt the behavior. Tool use allowed these dolphins to occupy a completely new spot in their ecosystem, making use of resources that would have been difficult to acquire otherwise, which is also known to be a major driver in human evolution. With the use of a simple sponge, Sponging Eve created a new way of life for her descendants in Shark Bay. The next time you use a tool to fix a problem, take a moment to thank the ancestors that first thought to use tools to overcome it. Not all learned behavior is a matter of life and death. Sometimes it's just about having fun. Have you ever joined a trend? If you have something in common with a group of killer whales along the Pacific coast of North America. In 1987, a female killer whale from a pod in the Pacific, northwest Puget Sound, debuted an unusual accessory, a dead salmon hat. Draping a dead salmon on the front of her nose, the whale pushed around the fish everywhere she went. The trend caught on, first within her immediate pod, then through the neighboring populations. By the end of the summer, every killer whale in the area was sporting their own dead salmon hat. Like all trends, it eventually faded after a few weeks. Wearing a salmon hat might seem trivial, but it illustrates how diverse learned behavior in whales can be. Keenly picking up on survival skills, but also being persuaded to indulge in a little silliness from time to time. A cloud of fine mist erupts from the surface of dark, freezing waters off the Gulf of Alaska. Like a dreamer waking from a deep sleep, she emerges. The massive, barnacle-encrusted head of a migrating female grey whale emerges, breaching the icy water. Slowly, deliberately, she surveys her surroundings. She's spy-hopping, a behavior where whales tilt their entire body vertically, keeping their head above water to look at the landscape above water for around 30 seconds. She's familiar with the edges of the coastline above water, just as she is the contours of the seafloor below. Satisfied, she submerges beneath the waves once more. Underwater, she makes a low-frequency cry. The rumbling sound reflects the underwater landscape of the seafloor back to her. Craggy seamounts or even shipwrecks are landmarks along her route, and her calls resonate with familiar shapes recorded in the acoustic memory of previous journeys. Along with the sight and sound that guides her on her journey, she feels the pull of a force unseen. Its ebbs and flows allow her to understand where she is in her migration. This is her sense of the Earth's magnetic field, which changes in direction and intensity with location. Magnetic compounds in her brain may act as her guide, an internal compass that guides her through vast, featureless stretches of open ocean. As she swims, her belly stirs. Months from now, she will become a calf in the refuge of the clear, crystal blue coastal waters along Mexico. She will guide her calf along this voyage of over 1,000 miles, teaching it how to make the journey, as she has many times before. As illustrated by the grey whale, the cold of the winter months signals the start of whales migrating towards low-latitude warmer waters. There, they'll give birth to their young. Sheltered from freezing temperatures and opportunistic predators in the sanctuary of calm tropical waters, calves are more likely to survive and grow strong enough to make the return journey when warmer weather arrives. When the seasons begin to change, the pod returns to higher latitude waters. These cold waters are typically far richer, with seasonal blooms of plankton or krill saturating them with enough nutrients to sustain whales' enormous bodies. An example of this migration pattern is the grey whale, which migrates nearly 10,000 miles from its breeding grounds in the balmy coastal waters of Baja California, Mexico, to the icy, nutrient-dense polar waters of Alaska to feed. Many celebrated explorers throughout history undertook dangerous globe-spanning voyages to unfamiliar corners of the world. Ferdinand Magellan's circumnavigation of the globe, or Zheng He's diplomatic expeditions throughout Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. But none did so while fasting the entire time, as well as caring for a newborn infant. This is the odyssey that baleen whale mothers undergo. When pregnant whales travel thousands of miles to their breeding grounds, they don't feed. Before she'll eat again, she'll give birth, nurse her calf with fat-rich milk, and make the return journey back to her feeding grounds while protecting and caring for her calf. This fast can last for as long as 8 months, as she prioritizes feeding her calf, drawing on reserves of energy stored in her body fat. To ease the long migration for her calf, she swims closely to it in a position known as echelon. Like a group of cyclists riding closely behind one another to reduce drag, the calf swims in its mother's slipstream. This allows the calf to maintain higher speed while expending less energy. However, this reduction in effort comes at the expense of the individual in the lead position. Just as the lead cyclist experiences more drag, the movement and speed of the mother also hampered with her infant in tow. Despite following the same route, the return journey alongside her calf is both more arduous and dangerous. A newborn whale calf can be targeted by large predators such as killer whales or sharks, and a wary mother may not have the ability to successfully fend them off. This is why the feeding months are so vital for pregnant whales. Grey whales that decrease their energy intake by a mere 4% when feeding will not have enough energy to successfully birth or wean a calf. When baleen whale mothers finally reach their feeding grounds, they've often lost anywhere from 1/3 to half of their body mass, a testament to their incredible feat of endurance. Just as famous explorers of old recorded and charted routes across the seas, whale mothers pass on migration routes to their young. Many whale migration routes appear to be matrilineally transmitted. To this day, beluga whales living in the waters of Hudson Bay, Canada, have not returned to specific areas from which they were wiped out during the 19th and 20th century, suggesting that without living female belugas to pass on this knowledge, historical migration routes remained forgotten to the broader population. Whale mothers play a central role in maintaining generational knowledge crucial to survival. Without their guidance, whales are quite literally lost. Navigating half the globe through the seemingly featureless expanse of the sea may seem impossible, but whale migration routes are strikingly consistent. 16 humpback whales tracked using radio tags from 2003 to 2010 displayed astonishing precision. Over distances of at least 120 miles, the whales strayed from their route by less than 1 degree. One whale swam over 1,300 miles in nearly a month. Over the course of its journey, its greatest deviation was a mere 0.4 degrees. In addition to combining hearing and sight, whales likely use another sense in their extensive navigation toolkit. They're likely to be able to sense the Earth's magnetic field, which fluctuates depending on position across the globe. Migrating animals, including whales, birds, and sea turtles, are able to sense their location based on the field's direction and intensity, akin to possessing an internal compass. Though exactly how whales are able to do this is unknown, recent evidence suggests that whales may be able to sense magnetic fields. Using records from 1985 to 2016, researchers found that grey whales were more likely to beach themselves during solar storms, violent eruptions of electromagnetic radiation from the sun. These bursts of solar activity sometimes disrupt human communication systems such as radio and satellite, causing interference. The increased noise from this interference is thought to confuse whales' magnetic sense, suddenly scrambling their ability to understand where they are. Imagine trying to find your way home in the midst of an intense blizzard. It would be overwhelming, even for the most seasoned navigator. A sperm whale prepares to dive into abyssal waters to hunt, a journey that could take it over 10,000 feet deep. While whales can travel vast distances across the globe, they're also capable of descending to impressive depths, withstanding pressure that would easily crush a human body. The physiological adaptations that enable whales to survive these depths are remarkable, from their massive ribcage bones to the tiniest of blood vessels. Think about bending a strip of wood versus a strip of rubber. The wood resists deformation and eventually breaks, while rubber simply bends with the force. This is an analogy for how whale bodies behave under pressure. They're designed to bend rather than break. If you look at the rib cage of a whale, most ribs are not attached to the sternum. Some ribs are also articulated, allowing them to hinge inward. At around 650 feet deep, the water pressure is sufficient to collapse the whale's lungs. Instead of snapping under the pressure, the ribcage bends inwards. This enables the entire thoracic cavity to partially collapse, resulting in no broken bones and a ribcage that folds inwards to protect the delicate membranes of its collapsed lungs. The next adaptation gives whale flesh its distinctive color. Instead of the bright red typically associated with muscle, whale muscle is a very dark red, so dark that it might appear black. This intense color is due to high concentrations of myoglobin, a protein that binds to oxygen. Humans store most of their oxygen in the blood, which circulates and returns to the lungs to be replenished. However, diving whales do not have the luxury of easy access to oxygen. Their myoglobin-dense muscles and organs turn their bodies into a reservoir for oxygen storage, with their entire body built to retain as much oxygen as possible. This doesn't mean that increasing myoglobin in your muscles will allow you to dive as long as a whale. High concentrations of myoglobin clump together, binding to each other instead of oxygen molecules, making increasing myoglobin alone ineffective. Whale myoglobin is structured to prevent clumping. One end of the molecule is positively charged, causing molecules to repel each other rather than stick together, similar to two poles of a magnet. Researchers can estimate how long different whales through evolutionary history could stay underwater just by inferring the electric charge of their myoglobin based on the protein structure. The walking whale, Pakicetus, could only hold its breath for 90 seconds, while the aquatic Basilosaurus, which evolved 15 million years later, could dive for up to 17 minutes. The saturated hue seen in the muscle of modern whales represents a four-fold improvement on Basilosaurus, as they are able to hold their breath for over an hour. Another system that protects whales from pressure is more subtle. If you look at the circulatory system of a whale, its brain and spinal cord are surrounded by a dense mesh-like network of blood vessels known as the retia mirabilia, which is Latin for wonderful net. As whales swim, their tail movements cause surges in blood pressure, and while diving are unable to exhale to relieve some of this pressure. This increases the risk of blood vessels rupturing or collapsing due to sudden changes in internal pressure. The retia mirabilia act as a system of pumps, redistributing blood to ensure that blood pressure remains at equilibrium, especially around sensitive systems such as the brain and spine. If you say you are holding your breath, it usually means you're in a state of suspense, full of anticipation or expectation. For diving whales, this phrase has a different meaning. They conserve the oxygen from their last inhale at the surface by going into a physiologically suspended state when diving. To conserve oxygen, their heartbeat slows, and the reduced oxygen flow is redirected to only immediately essential organs like the heart and brain. Other organ function, such as in the liver and kidneys, is temporarily suspended. Whales might not be holding their breath out of nervousness or excitement, but the stakes for them are easily just as high. What goes in must eventually come out. And whales' prodigious appetites produce an equally impressive amount of excrement. From a generous scattering of neon yellow crumbs to a voluminous plume of brick red liquid, whale feces come in many sizes, shapes, colors, and textures. Instead of sinking, this loose waste is surprisingly buoyant, floating on the surface of water and staying there. The impact of whale feces, just like the feces itself, lingers. Long after the whale itself is miles away from its last rest stop, this reminder of its presence continues to have lasting effects. The vibrant colors of whale waste reveal a crucial property: the nutrients contained within. Whale feces are incredibly rich in nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and iron. A 2010 study found that whales contribute over 23,000 metric tons of nitrogen to the Gulf of Maine, more than all the rivers combined that flow into the Gulf. Whales often relieve themselves when they surface to breathe, acting as massive vehicles for nutrients. The significant ecological contribution is known as the whale pump, an upward biological pump that transports nutrients from deeper to surface waters. This huge influx into otherwise nutrient-poor surface waters is a crucial catalyst. Phytoplankton populations are limited by nutrients, meaning their growth is constrained by insufficient nutrient levels. When that nutrient threshold is surpassed, phytoplankton populations rapidly increase, leading to a spike of primary productivity. As the base of the food chain, phytoplankton's growth ripples throughout the entire ecosystem, supporting healthy, abundant populations of sea life at all levels of the food chain. The whale pump isn't limited to vertical transport either. As long-distance migrators, whales often travel from nutrient-rich polar feeding grounds to their breeding grounds further south, fertilizing the waters with their feces along the way. Whales redistribute nutrients globally and retrieve them from the deep, demonstrating an impact that cannot be understated. Even when uneaten, phytoplankton blooms that follow in a whale's wake have a major environmental impact. Dead phytoplankton that settles on the seafloor acts as a carbon sink, storing 2 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide, the primary reason why the Earth's oceans store 90% of all sequestered carbon. In 2014, the extent of whales' contributions was studied in the Southern Ocean. The freezing waters there are unusually nutrient-rich except for iron. Fortunately, whale feces are a potent iron fertilizer, enriched over 10 million times more than the surrounding waters. The 12,000 sperm whales in the Southern Ocean alone were estimated to result in phytoplankton blooms that sequestered 200,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide, more than the carbon dioxide emissions of Argentina in 2022. To think that whale populations today are anywhere from 10 to 25% of their historical levels, imagine what they could accomplish if allowed to flourish once again. When considering the importance of animal conservation, their feces don't often come to mind, but whales act as a natural pump for nutrients and storage mechanism for carbon through their bodily functions. Researchers highlight their crucial role in maintaining ecosystem health and even mitigating the effects of climate change. The multifaceted impacts of whale feces illustrate how the natural world is intricately and unexpectedly connected, and that whales' contributions to our planet are nothing to be sniffed at. Throughout the 1960s, deep-sea trawlers hauled up strange assemblages of mollusks, all attached to fragments of whale bones. It wouldn't be until 1987 when the provenance of these elusive deep-sea creatures would become clear, when the first live whale foal was discovered on an oceanographic expedition. In the pitch-black waters off Santa Catalina, California, over 4,000 feet deep, the piercing lights of the submersible Alvin revealed the skeleton of a whale, partly buried under sediment. Yet the long-dead remains teemed with life. The bones were covered in limpets, clams, worms, and fields of white microbial mats. Even years after their death, whales continue to sustain life. The barren depths of the sea usually receive very little sustenance, mostly in the form of marine snow, tiny remnants of organic carbon that slowly fall into the deep. Most deep-sea animals rely on these flecks to survive, picking through the sandy seafloor in search of them or catching the bits of debris as they drift downwards. With such a sparse existence, one can imagine that seeing the dead body of a whale as it finally comes to rest on the sea floor after a long descent from above must seem almost unthinkable. It contains as many nutrients as 2,000 years' worth of marine snow. But as if looking upon a divine portent, the denizens of the deep spring into action. A whale foal is a rare gift from above, and they are ready to receive it. From the moment the whale's giant carcass comes to rest, the deep sea begins to transform every inch of it. Flesh and fat become a feast for large scavengers. Tendrils of worms gently reach outwards like odd-looking blooms as their bodies burrow into rich marrow. The whale's towering skeleton, resembling a cathedral adorned with mosaics of mussels and limpets, a sanctuary for smaller invertebrates who would take refuge under its roof. Many of these creatures are pilgrims of the whale foal, specializing or even existing only on or around them. The skeletal remains of a whale are ultimately transformed into myriad ways of life. living, growing communities that will thrive for decades to come. The nature of these communities evolves over time. Drawn to the whale pool by scent, mobile scavengers arrive, including larger creatures that feast on the carcass. Lumbering sleeper sharks and writhing hagfish tear into the soft tissues, stripping the bulk of the meat away from the bone. This flesh can sustain these scavengers for 4 months to 2 years, until only the skeleton and clinging remnants of organic material remain. The next set of organisms, known as enrichment opportunists, ensure that these leftovers do not go to waste, continuing to break down the remains for around another 2 years. Smaller invertebrates such as mollusks, worms, and crustaceans pick away any remaining blubber and flesh, rummaging through the surrounding sediment for any edible morsel. Some even feed on the bones themselves. The bone-eating worm Osedax slowly bores into the bone using acid, extending its root-like feeding appendages to avail itself of the rich lipids contained within. Finally, only the skeleton of the whale remains. Surprisingly, it's this seemingly barren form that supports the highest biodiversity of life. During the sulfophilic stage, specialized bacteria break down lipids in the bones and convert them to sulfides. These sulfides support a dense assembly of life forms. White bacterial mats, deep-sea mussels and tube worms spread and entwine themselves over bone-like moss on tree bark. This undersea garden can last over a decade, sometimes persisting for up to 50 years. Whale falls perfectly encapsulate the cycles of the natural world. Even in death, strange, wonderful life springs forth from the whale's remains. Whales have long symbolized the majesty of nature in the human imagination. In the 1923 poem Whales Weep Not, poet D.H. Lawrence uses whales to represent the power of the primeval earth. They say the sea is cold, but the sea contains the hottest blood of all, and the wildest, the most urgent. All the whales in the wider deeps, hot are they, as they urge on and dive beneath the icebergs. The right whales, the sperm whales, the hammerheads, the killers there they blow hot, wild, white breath out of the sea. When Lawrence wrote this poem, many whale species were critically endangered. Before the widespread use of fossil fuels, the demand for whale oil made whaling a lucrative industry. Commercial whaling throughout the 19th century drove bowhead, grey and right whales close to extinction. Whalers exploited successive populations of whales when each population became too few to catch easily, simply moving on to the next species with little thought to the consequences. While indigenous peoples, such as the Inuit or the Chukchi, have practiced subsistence hunting of whales for millennia, early industrial whaling was an entirely different beast. A combination of technology and scale accelerated the industry to a deadly pace. With the invention of steamships and gun-loaded harpoons, some estimates show that more whales were hunted in the early 20th century than in the previous 400 years combined. It wasn't until 1982 that an international coalition, the International Whaling Commission (IWC), established a moratorium on commercial whaling, which took effect in 1986 and remains in place today. In the decades since, some whale populations have made impressive comebacks. Humpback whales in the Indian Ocean numbered only 600 in the 1950s, but have steadily recovered to a population of 36,000 today. Southern Ocean right whales nearly wiped out in the 1920s with less than 300 remaining, but now are 15,000 strong. Even as whale populations teetered on the brink, Lawrence must have seen the fierce resilience and intense vitality of the whale embodied by their stunning recovery today. Most of the threats that whales face today are still driven by human activity. Climate change and overfishing threatens the delicate ecology of their polar feeding grounds, while pollution and habitat degradation especially imperils vulnerable calves and places the future of populations at risk. In Whales Weep Not, whales are portrayed as a force of nature, their movements indistinguishable from the powerful surge of the ocean's current. This portrayal is not merely a grandiose metaphor. Whales so profoundly impact the natural spaces that they inhabit that they're an integral part of these environments. Protecting and conserving whales is, by extension, moving to protect and conserve the multitude of ecosystems that exist on our planet. Just as a humpback trusts that its song will travel for miles to another of its kind, whales know we are all interconnected, even through the vast open oceans through which they roam. Since the very first whale took its first step into the ancient seas 50 million years ago, these oceanic titans have thrived and diversified throughout Earth's waters in a myriad of forms. In whales, we recognize traits that reflect the best of humanity: curiosity, intelligence, and a deep sense of care for those around us. It's a privilege to share a planet with a creature that mirrors our most noble qualities. Some stories deserve a second glance. If you need more time to take it all in, add this video to your YouTube playlist for next week. In the meantime, click here to dive into the next episode.